Eleanor Whittaker, at the age of 91, sat quietly in her small, cluttered apartment, her frail hands resting gently on her lap as she gazed past the faded photographs scattered across the dusty table before her. The walls, lined with cracked paint, seemed to hold echoes of a bygone era, a time when her world was shattered by the relentless chaos of war. The faint scent of stale paper and dried lavender lingered in the air, mingling with memories too vivid to forget. Outside, the distant hum of city life persisted, but inside her sanctuary, silence was thick with unspoken stories. She reached out, finger tracing the edges of a black and white photo. A young girl with wide, cautious eyes, standing amidst rubble and burning buildings. Her voice, thin yet steady, broke the quiet as she whispered. That little girl didn't know what was coming next. No one did. Her eyes softened as she closed her eyes briefly, visions flooding her mind, screaming sirens, the smell of burnt wood, icy gusts from shattered windows, as the city trembled under the weight of bombs. She remembered the nights when she huddled under a torn blanket, trembling while her mother barked commands, her voice sharp and filled with paranoia. "You don't understand!" Her mother had snarled once, voice trembling with frayed nerves. This is survival. Nothing else matters. But Eleanor had learned to adapt, even in the face of relentless cruelty. Her small fingers clutched a worn locket, a fragile reminder of innocence lost as her mind drifted back to the hunger she endured, the cold that seeped into her bones, and the constant hum of fear that had become her lullaby. She had once whispered to herself in those dark hours, "There has to be more than this." And somehow, amid the darkness, she had clung to a quiet ember of hope. Hope that someday, somehow, she would find a way out. Now, as she sat surrounded by relics of her past, she felt that ember flicker anew, a testament to a resilience forged in the crucible of her childhood. Her voice grew softer, yet resolute, as she murmured, "I survived because I refused to let the darkness define me." Her eyes, cloudy but still bright with determination, reflected a lifetime of pain and perseverance. The room seemed to listen, holding her stories close. Stories of a girl who, despite everything, found the strength to endure, to dream, and ultimately to transform her suffering into a silent but powerful testament that even in the shadow of destruction, hope can flicker stubbornly, refusing to be extinguished. The air inside the cramped, dimly lit room thickened with tension, a palpable electricity that seemed to pulse with every burst of her mother's fury. Eleanor remembered that day with an unsettling clarity. The sun outside was slipping behind the battered rooftops, casting long shadows that stretched across the peeling walls. Her mother, eyes blazing with a mixture of rage and despair, had stormed into the small kitchen where Eleanor was peeling potatoes with trembling fingers. It was over a spilled cup of water, an insignificant mistake, yet in her mother's eyes, a sign of her daughter's incompetence. "You're useless!" her mother spat, voice trembling with venom. Without warning, she lunged forward, her hand connecting with Eleanor's cheek in a sharp, stinging slap that sent her stumbling backward. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the silence of the evening, reverberating through Eleanor's bones. She fell to her knees, clutching her face, as her mother's voice tore through her like a whip. "You'll never be anything. You're just a burden, another mess I have to clean up." Her mother's face twisted with rage, veins bulging on her forehead, hair wild and unkempt. Eleanor's eyes welled with tears, but she dared not cry out loud. She knew any display of vulnerability only fed the storm. Instead, she pressed her trembling hands against her cheek, feeling the sting of her mother's fury burning into her skin and her soul. Her mind raced. What had she done to deserve this? Why was love so harsh and unforgiving? Her tiny heart pounded painfully against her ribcage as her mother turned away, muttering curses under her breath, leaving Eleanor cradling her face and trembling in the oppressive silence. That slap, so brutal and sudden, was not just an act of violence, but a symbol of the relentless chaos that shadowed her childhood. A daily tempest she had come to endure with a fractured spirit and a fragile hope hidden beneath layers of pain. In the quiet refugee beneath her battered bed, Eleanor clutched her worn, faded doll, a fragile lifeline amid the chaos that had become her childhood. The tiny figure with chipped porcelain eyes and a threadbare dress was her secret sanctuary, a whisper of innocence that refused to be entirely erased by the violence surrounding her. Her small hands trembled as she pressed the doll close to her chest, feeling the rough fabric of her threadbare blanket beneath her fingertips, anchoring her to a fleeting sense of safety. Softly, she whispered to herself, her voice trembling but determined. Please, just a little while longer. Please let the bombs stop flying. Let the anger fade so I can breathe. Outside, the distant thunder of explosions rumbled like a relentless beast, shaking the walls and rattling the windows, while inside her mind the echoes of her mother's brutal words echoed like a haunting refrain. She remembered her mother's harsh voice. "You're nothing but a bother, a curse," and the way her mother's fury would flare like wildfire, burning through the fragile veneer of Eleanor's hope. In these secret moments, she whispered silent prayers, her eyes squeezed shut, imagining a different life beyond the darkness, dreaming of safety, of love, of being someone worthy of kindness. Her tiny frame curled into a fetal position, the doll pressed against her cheek, as if it could shield her from the storm both outside and within. With each whispered plea, her resolve grew stronger. She vowed silently that she would survive this nightmare, that someday she would leave the shadows behind. Though her environment was soaked in fear and despair, her heart clung fiercely to those fleeting moments of hope, tiny sparks in the vast, unyielding darkness. The distant sound of bombs continued, yet beneath her bed, Eleanor's spirit flickered like a fragile flame, defiant and unbreakable, whispering promises of resilience that would one day light her way out of the chaos. On a night thick with the stench of alcohol and the sharp tang of fermented rage, Eleanor was only 10 years old, yet her small frame trembled with the weight of an impending nightmare. Her mother, intoxicated beyond recognition, staggered into the dimly lit room, the flickering candle casting long, grotesque shadows on the peeling walls. In her drunken fury, she grasped a jagged shard of broken glass, her eyes blazing with madness as she lunged towards her trembling daughter. "You little witch!" her mother slurred, voice dripping with venom. "You think you can hide from me?" Her hand swung wildly, the glass catching the faint light, as she aimed it with murderous intent. Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. Fear constricted her throat, yet her mind spun fiercely, desperate for escape. Instinct overtook her trembling legs as she bolted, slipping behind a crumbling wall, its plaster cracked and peeling, like the fragile veneer of safety she so desperately clung to. She pressed herself against the rough, cold surface, clutching her only refuge, a battered doll pressed tightly to her chest, as her breath came in ragged gasps. Her eyes darted frantically, searching for a way out while her mind screamed in silent terror. "If I don't move now, I'll be hurt," she thought, her small fists clenched in silent resolve. The sound of her mother's stumbling footsteps grew louder, muffled curses spilling into the air as she threw furniture aside, searching for her prey. "Come out, you little rat!" her mother roared, voice echoing like a thunderclap. Eleanor's mind sharpened with desperate clarity. She remembered her grandmother's stories of cunning and quick thinking in moments of danger. Heart pounding, she spotted a loose brick at the base of the wall, an opening she could use, with trembling fingers. She pushed it aside just enough to slide through, her small body squeezing into the narrow gap, barely more than a slit. As she slipped into the darkness behind the wall, she could feel her mother's furious thrashing just inches away, the sound of glass shattering and furniture crashing like the fury of a storm. Her breath caught as she crouched in the cold shadow, trembling but alive, realizing in that instant that her survival depended not on luck, but on her own swift, silent action. Though her body was weak and her spirit battered, a fierce spark ignited within her, an unspoken vow that she would find a way to outsmart the chaos, to escape the violence that threatened to undo her. The night closed around her like a shroud, but her mind stayed alive with the knowledge that, even in the depths of her despair, a flicker of resilience had taken root, an ember that, if nurtured, could someday ignite her path to freedom. As the deafening roar of bombs melted into a suffocating silence, Eleanor's trembling footsteps echoed softly across the damp, uneven cellar floor. Shadows danced on the rough stone walls, flickering from the distant flashes of explosions above, casting a ghostly pallor over her small, dirt-smudged face. Her breath hitched as she curled into a corner, clutching her thin arms around herself, feeling the cold seep into her bones. Suddenly, a faint movement near the corner caught her eye. A figure slumped against the wall, cloaked in tattered rags, his face gaunt and smeared with dirt and sweat. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Unsure whether to flee or stay, the man's eyes, however, shone with a quiet steadiness, and when he shifted slightly, revealing a jagged scar across his cheek, he offered her a slow, deliberate smile. "Hey there," he whispered, voice raspy but comforting amid the chaos. "Don't be afraid." Eleanor hesitated, her eyes wide with fear and curiosity, as he leaned closer, lowering his voice to a confidential hush. "You're safe now, at least for a little while. There's a network down here, underground, secret and strong. Resistance. We're fighting for something bigger than us, something worth living for, something that can't be broken by bombs or fear." His gaze held hers, probing, then offering a fragile hope. "You see that crack in the wall? That's how we move in and out, quiet, fast. You'd be surprised what a child can do when she's got a purpose. Don't let this chaos define you. Your spirit's stronger than any blast." Eleanor's mind spun, her trembling easing into a cautious fire. She had heard stories, whispers of rebellion, of brave souls fighting back, but never truly believed she'd find herself in the heart of it. Now, with his words lingering like a secret promise in her ear, she felt a flicker of something new ignite within her, an ember of rebellion, fragile but fiercely alive. Looking into his eyes, she saw not just a stranger hiding in the shadows, but a spark of defiance, a reminder that even amid ruin, hope could take root in the most unlikely of places. Her small hand tightened around her ragged dress, and for the first time she wondered whether her future could hold more than mere survival. Perhaps it could hold a fight, a voice, a chance to change everything. In the dim glow of a flickering candle, Eleanor's trembling fingers fumbled with a battered radio she had secretly hidden beneath the loose floorboard of her cramped, shadowed attic. Her heart pounded like a drum within her chest, each beat echoing the rush of adrenaline surging through her veins. She had listened to rumors, whispers passed from underground networks of resistance. But tonight, she dared to turn the dial, herself. Her fingers hesitated over the battered knob, her breath catching as she adjusted it carefully. praying that her trembling hands wouldn't betray her. Suddenly, a crackling voice pierced the silence, a faint, warbled transmission that hummed with promise, like a fragile thread connecting her to a world beyond her battered city, beyond her battered mind. She pressed her ear closer, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and longing. Remember, the night belongs to us. Stay hidden, stay strong. The tide is turning and hope is a whisper in the chaos. The voice crackled, sharp and urgent, yet imbued with an undeniable tone of defiance. Eleanor's cheeks flushed with a sudden rush of warmth, an ember stirring within her, flickering against the cold darkness of her existence. She clenched her fists around a tattered cloth, holding it tight against her trembling hands, as if that simple act could anchor her to that distant spark of rebellion. "Can you hear me?" She whispered into the silence, voice thick with emotion. Her eyes shimmered with tears she refused to shed, her mind racing with images of her mother's cruel face, the endless nights haunted by nightmares, yet also filled with the flickering hope that perhaps her own voice, her own choice to listen and believe, could ignite a new path. In that moment, Eleanor made a silent vow, an act of quiet rebellion that defied her circumstances. She would listen, learn, and nurture that fragile flame of hope, even amid the shadows of fear. Her fingers traced the worn edges of the radio, imagining it as a bridge, a secret portal to her future, one where she could reclaim her voice, her agency, and bit by bit, rebuild the strength her childhood had tried to steal. As the transmission faded into static, she whispered to herself, "This is my fight, my story. No longer just survival, but rebellion." And in her heart, she felt the first crack of a new resolve, a quiet revolution sparked by a single act of defiance. The choice to listen, to believe, and to dream beyond the darkness. Under the cover of a midnight blackout, Eleanor's small frame pressed against the cold, uneven wall of her cramped room. The flickering candlelight cast trembling shadows across her face, highlighting the determined set of her jaw despite the tremor in her hands. Outside, the distant hum of patrols whispered secrets through the cracked window. But she had already memorized the rhythm. Step by cautious step, they moved like ghosts through the dark streets. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, sharp and unforgiving. "If I don't send you away tonight, you'll be lost forever. You're nothing but a burden." The words burned hotter than the flames of her fear. Eleanor's breath hitched, her fingers trembling as she reached beneath her pillow, clutching the rough, jagged edges of a broken glass shard she'd hidden there for years. Her silent guardian. With a final glance at the door, she whispered, "Tonight is not the night I give up," and slipped silently from her bed, clutching her coat close around her trembling shoulders. Her bare feet pressed softly into the cold wooden floor as she moved toward the window, the latch stiff but finally yielding under her careful effort. The night air was thick with the scent of damp earth and burnt wood, a mixture that made her nose crinkle, reminders of the chaos she had lived through. She looked back one last time at the small room that had been her prison, her sanctuary, her battleground. Her heart pounded fiercely against her ribs, loud enough to drown out the distant shouts from her mother's voice, echoing in her mind. With a deep inhale, she pressed her palm against the broken frame, using her knowledge of the weak spots, where the wood splintered and the paint chipped, to slip out unnoticed. Crawling on her belly, she lowered herself onto the cold, uneven stones of the alley below, her breathing ragged but steady, her eyes scanning the shadowed streets. Every step she took was deliberate, silent, cautious, until she reached the darkened main road, where the shadows seemed to swallow her tiny figure. She clutched the small, ragged scarf around her neck, a token of her defiance, a symbol of her decision to claim her freedom. Her mind raced with the possibilities ahead. Hidden pathways, safe houses, the distant promise of hope. She moved like a whisper, dodging patrols behind abandoned carts, slipping through alleyways where broken glass and debris crunched beneath her feet. Her ears strained for sounds, voices, footsteps, danger. Yet her resolve grew stronger with each heartbeat. This was her act of rebellion, a daring escape born from desperation, an assertion that her life belonged to her, even in the face of the darkness threatening to consume her. As she reached the edge of the city, she paused, glancing back once more at the faint glow of her home, then turned toward the unknown, toward survival, toward a future where she would carve her own story out of the chaos. In the shadows of the crumbling alleyway, Eleanor's trembling hands rummaged through the torn remnants of old cloth she had scavenged earlier that day. Her mind racing with a desperate plan. She knew the patrols, her mother's enforcers, would be combing the city streets soon, eyes sharp for anyone attempting to escape or hide. Her heart pounded fiercely, but she refused to surrender to fear. With a steadying breath she pressed, a jagged piece of burlap against her cheek, dabbing dirt and soot into the fabric, smudging her face into a mottled mask of mud and charcoal. Next she grasped a tattered strip of fabric, twisting it into a crude headscarf that she fashioned, into a makeshift turban covering her silver hair, which would reveal her identity otherwise. Her fingers trembled, but she pushed forward, tearing a fragment of a faded, symbol-laden cloth she had found, an old soldier's flag perhaps, and carefully drew symbols on her face with a charred piece of wood she'd found discarded nearby. The symbols were primitive but meaningful. Protective markings, signs of resistance, a personal sigil of hope. As she worked, she whispered fiercely, "No one will recognize me now. This is my shield." Her eyes darted around, searching for a mirror or reflective surface, but none appeared. Instead, she relied on her memory of the symbols. Faint images of strength and rebellion etched into her mind, and the knowledge that her resourcefulness was her greatest weapon. With the makeshift disguise complete, she slipped into the darkness, moving like a ghost through the deserted streets. Every step was calculated, her mind alert for patrols, her body tense with the adrenaline of defiance. She knew that her survival depended on her ability to pass unnoticed, to vanish from her mother's relentless grasp. The disguise was more than mere concealment. It embodied her determination to claim control over her life, to document her resilience in every crude stroke and patch of fabric. As she approached the city's outskirts, she paused, heart pounding in her chest, then took a deep breath and pressed on into the unknown, her mind echoing her silent vow. "This is my true face now. No one can take my strength away." The night swallowed her silhouette, a symbol of resilience cloaked in scraps, yet radiating an indomitable spirit. Her act of rebellion, her declaration of independence amid chaos and darkness. Under the cover of night, Eleanor moved swiftly through the shadowed alleyways, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and fierce determination. Her makeshift disguise, an assemblage of torn fabric, scraps of cloth, and symbols she had meticulously stitched, clung to her like a second skin, each piece a testament to her resourcefulness. As she reached the dilapidated doorway of an abandoned building, she paused, slipping a small scrap of paper from the sole of her worn shoe into a hidden pocket sewn into the lining of her coat. She whispered softly to herself, "Come on, Eleanor. You've done this before." As her fingers brushed against the rough fabric, feeling the tiny folded message inside, she crouched behind a crumbling wall, her eyes scanning the empty street, then gently peeled away a loose thread from her sleeve to tie the paper securely. Her lips pressed into a thin line, voice barely above a whisper. Message sent. Now. Just wait. Moments later, she spotted a shadow approaching. An ally from the underground resistance. A fellow survivor whose eyes sparkled with cautious trust. Eleanor stepped out of her hiding spot, her movements fluid, her voice calm, yet urgent. It's done. The message is hidden. They'll get it, no matter what. The resistance member nodded, eyes flickering with gratitude and respect. You're sharper than most, he said quietly, glancing at her makeshift disguise, evidence of her daring ingenuity. She shot a quick, determined smile. Survival is all about being one step ahead, she replied, her voice steady despite the chaos swirling around them. As she watched him slip into the darkness, Eleanor whispered again, this time with a glimmer of hope piercing through her weariness. One day, this will all be over, and I'll have my peace. But until then, I'll keep fighting. Not just for myself, but for everyone who's suffered in silence. Her eyes lingered on the horizon, knowing that her cleverness, the secret hiding places, the coded messages, the quick improvisations were her greatest weapons against the relentless forces seeking to crush her spirit. With one last glance at the night's quiet chaos, she turned her steps towards the next task, her mind sharp, her resolve unbreakable, her resilience echoing in every calculated move she made. In the dim glow of a flickering candle, Eleanor carefully unrolled her tattered journal, its worn leather cover softened from years of use. She paused, fingers trembling slightly, as she traced the delicate symbols she had meticulously sketched. Intertwined loops, jagged lines, tiny crosses, each one a coded language only she understood. With deliberate precision, she dipped her trembling pen into faded ink and began to write a brief entry. Today I felt the weight of despair pressing in, but I found a flicker of strength in my resolve. Her hand moved swiftly, words flowing. In her secret sanctuary, a place only her mind and her pen shared. The journal was more than a collection of ink and paper. It was her internal fortress, an escape from the chaos outside, a quiet rebellion against the brutal memories that haunted her. She knew her internal world was fragile, yet fiercely protected within these pages. Every symbol was a shield, every word a small act of defiance. As she drew a circle with a line through it, symbolizing her resolve to overcome fear, she whispered softly, "You can't silence me. Not here. Not now." Her gaze flicked to the shadows dancing on the wall, where her fears lurked like silent predators. She clenched her jaw, feeling the weight of her past pressing against her chest. But then she added a tiny star in the corner, her silent reminder that even in darkness, hope could flicker like a distant lighthouse. Her eyes flicked over the symbols again, connecting her fears, hopes, and memories in a tangled web of resilience. The act of drawing and writing became her silent prayer, a ritual that fortified her spirit in moments when the outside world threatened to swallow her whole. When finished, she gently closed the journal, pressing her fingertips against the symbols, each one a testament to her survival, a record of her internal war where courage was inked into every line. Her breath steadied as she tucked the journal back into her hidden pocket, feeling a quiet sense of empowerment. In that small act of creation, Eleanor reaffirmed her strength. No matter how dark the night, her internal sanctuary, crafted with symbols and hope, would continue to shield her. Her courage was not loud or grandiose. It was embedded in these fragile, intricate symbols. Her silent stand against the relentless tide of darkness, a testament that even in the deepest chaos, her resilient spirit endured through quiet, unbreakable resolve. The air was thick with smoke and the bitter tang of burning wood as Eleanor crouched behind a crumbling wall, her heart pounding in her chest like a frantic drumbeat, her lips pressed into a thin line, eyes darting to the dim outline of the soldier she'd trusted, her friend, her confidant. Now trembling under the weight of a brutal interrogation, she listened intently, every word measured, every flicker of hope fading with each breath. Suddenly, a harsh voice cut through the chaos. "We know who you are, Eleanor. You can't hide forever." The soldier's eyes widened in terror as the torturer's grip tightened, and Eleanor's stomach clenched. She knew this moment was coming. Betrayal had lurked like a shadow, waiting to strike. Her mind raced, flashes of their secret meetings, whispered plans, and the memories of her own daring escape flickering like ghostly images. She clenched her fists, fighting the instinct to break and run, but her resolve held firm. "You're making a mistake," she whispered desperately, voice trembling but defiant. The torturer sneered, leaning close, voice dripping with menace. "You're expendable now. Your friend will crack, and then so will you." The soldier, eyes brimming with tears, shook his head slowly, voice hoarse. "It's not her fault." A cruel laugh echoed as the torturer raised his baton, cracking it against the cold stone wall. The blow hit the soldier's knee, and he crumpled, crying out. Eleanor's throat tightened, her vision blurring with tears, but she refused to succumb. As they dragged her to her feet, her mind flashed back to the countless nights she had spent, planning this moment. Her secret journal hidden beneath her coat, the handwritten symbols of her resilience she'd etched into every page, her silent prayer woven into each stroke. Now, faced with the darkness closing in, she understood the profound truth. Her loyalty to her cause had to be weighed against her instinct for survival. She looked the torturer straight in the eye, voice steady despite the tremor in her soul. "You can break my body, but you will never break my spirit." Yet, in that moment of raw truth, her courage was tested to its breaking point. The soldier's confession spilled out under duress, each word a blow to her heart. Her mind spun. Should she deny everything, claim innocence, or accept the consequences of her unwavering truth? As the door slammed shut behind her, the cold steel of the prison engulfed her, and Eleanor sank to her knees, whispering silent vows of resilience. Her internal world, the symbols she'd crafted in her journal, became her silent rebellion, the unyielding testament that her spirit, even when battered and betrayed, could still endure the deepest darkness. In the suffocating silence of the prison cell, Eleanor sat rigidly against the cold wall, her hands trembling slightly. Not from fear, but from a fierce, unyielding will. The interrogator's rough voice shattered the quiet, pressing her with relentless questions, each word designed to unravel her resolve. "Tell us what you know," he barked, leaning forward, eyes narrowing in suspicion. But Eleanor's mind drifted back to her childhood, her mother's snarling face, fists pounding with fury, the bitter taste of tears she had learned to swallow, the endless nights haunted by shadows of violence that had shaped her. She clenched her jaw, recalling how her mother's screams echoed in her head, a relentless echo of chaos that had once threatened to drown her entirely. Now, in this stark room, she understood that her survival was not just a matter of endurance, but a silent act of rebellion. Her gaze steadied as she looked the interrogator in the eye, voice calm yet resolute. "You can break my body, but you will never break my spirit." Her words hung heavy in the air, a defiant shield against her tormentors. As they continued, their torment, Eleanor's mind played tricks, visions of her mother's rage transforming into the cold, calculated cruelty of her captors, the screams turning into whispered threats. She refused to give in. Every fiber of her being rebelled against surrender. She pressed her trembling fingers against the rough stone, feeling the jagged edge beneath her fingertips, grounding herself in the tangible reality of her strength. Her internal world became a fortress of memories. Her secret journal, her sketches of hope, symbols she'd crafted to survive the darkness. With each interrogation, she silently vowed that her endurance was a form of rebellion, proof that, despite the physical pain and mental anguish, her spirit remained unbroken. Her mind raced through the lessons she had learned in the shadows of war and abuse, recalling how she had once disguised herself with scraps of cloth, how she had hidden her hope behind a mask of silence. The interrogator's voice grew harsher, but Eleanor's resolve only intensified. She knew that her defiance was not just in her words, but in her very existence, an act of resistance against the tyranny of her past and present oppressors. Her eyes flickered with a quiet fire, a testament to her internal strength, a beacon piercing through the darkness. She understood that her survival was no longer merely a matter of physical endurance, but a profound assertion that even in the depths of despair, the human spirit can forge resilience, a silent, unwavering rebellion that refuses to be extinguished. In the suffocating silence of her solitary confinement, Eleanor's eyes flickered with a fierce, unyielding fire as her trembling hands reached for a handful of dirt from the cracked, dusty floor. The room was sterile in its barrenness, but within her mind a storm raged, memories of screams, bruises, and broken hopes crashing over her like relentless waves. She pressed the cold, gritty dirt against her face, smearing it across her cheeks and forehead, transforming her outward appearance into a mask of defiance. Her breath hitched as she whispered sotto voce, "You cannot silence me. I am still here. I am still fighting." The rough texture of the dirt under her fingertips felt like the weight of her past, heavy yet grounding. Her gaze hardened as she stared into the shadows, her voice trembling, but resolute. "You thought you broke me? No. I am the storm you fear, the ember that refuses to die." She pressed her palms to her face, smudging the dirt further, each smear a silent declaration, an act of rebellion, a symbol that pain and darkness would not define her. Every whisper of dirt on her skin was a testament to her resilience, a visceral reminder that even in this cage of despair, her spirit remained unbroken. Tears blurred her vision momentarily, but she wiped them away with gritty fingers, whispering again, "I am more than your scars, more than your shadows. I carry my strength in every mark I leave on my face, on my soul." In that act of silent, visceral rebellion, Eleanor's pain distilled into raw action, an unspoken promise to herself that her suffering would not be her end, but the forge in which her resilience was tempered anew. Her eyes, now streaked with dirt and determination, shimmered with the quiet hope that someday her scars would tell a story, not of submission, but of indomitable strength. In the shadows of the crumbling cellar where she had clandestinely taken refuge, Eleanor's trembling fingers clutched a small, jagged piece of metal, a fragment she had painstakingly gathered from the debris of her surroundings. Her heart hammered against her ribs with a mixture of fear and fierce determination. Knowing this tiny shard could alter everything, she whispered urgently to the guard, a man whose sympathetic eyes betrayed his own internal conflict. "Tonight's the night. When the patrol passes, I'll slip past them and plant this beneath the supply truck. An unmistakable mark that we're still fighting, still alive." Her voice was steady despite her shaking hands, eyes darting toward the narrow slit in the wall that served as her only window to the outside chaos. The guard nodded, voice low but firm. "Be careful, Eleanor. If they catch you..." She cut him off with a quick, defiant glance. "I've survived worse. This is my chance to hit back, to send a signal that resistance runs deeper than fear." As the muffled roar of distant explosions reverberated through the damp air, Eleanor's mind raced with images of her childhood, her mother's wrath, and her own fierce resolve to reclaim her agency. She carefully crouched, slipping the metal shard into her pocket, then moved like a whisper, her steps silent as she navigated the labyrinth of discarded crates and rusted machinery. When the guard's footsteps receded into the darkness, she pressed her back against the cold concrete, taking a deep breath and smoothing her tattered coat, which she had dyed with dirt and ash to disguise her appearance. Her eyes flicked to the small makeshift crucifix she had fashioned from scraps, her own symbolic talisman of hope, and with a quick, conscious gesture she scratched a hidden mark into the underside of a nearby crate, a secret code only her allies would recognize. Her pulse quickened as she slipped out through the narrow gap, body pressed low to avoid the flickering lanterns. Each step a defiance of her past imprisonment, each breath a testament to her unyielding desire for freedom. The night air was thick and acrid, but Eleanor felt an electric surge of rebellion coursing through her veins. Every movement, every heartbeat was a promise, an act of sabotage that would ripple through the oppressive machinery of her captors and ignite a spark of hope among those still hiding in the shadows. Her mind replayed her mother's voice, taunting and oppressive. But now she held the power, the spark of rebellion that no chains could contain. As she reached the designated spot beneath the truck, she knelt briefly, placing the shard precisely where it would be discovered, then cast a final glance at the darkened sky, whispering softly, "This is for every night I thought I'd never see dawn, for every moment I was afraid. I choose to fight." With that, she melted back into the darkness, her figure a fleeting ghost of resilience, an indomitable symbol that even within the deepest darkness, hope and rebellion could find their voice. In the depths of her mind's eye, Eleanor faced her oppressor, the dark, shadowed figure that embodied her mother's relentless cruelty, standing in an imagined arena where the past's suffocating grip could finally be challenged. The scene unfurled like a vivid cinematic tableau. Her mother's harsh voice echoed, "You're nothing without me," reverberating through the cold air, but Eleanor's eyes burned with a different fire now. She clenched her fists, feeling the rough texture of the scrap of cloth she had torn from her dress, her makeshift symbol of rebellion, pressed tightly in her palm. Her voice, trembling yet fierce, broke through the silence. "No more. I am not your shadow." With a sudden defiant act, she stepped forward in her mind's eye, and the oppressive figure lunged, snarling, "You'll never escape me." But Eleanor met her gaze unflinchingly. "Watch me," she whispered, voice echoing with years of suppressed strength. In her imagination, she reached behind her, grabbing a shard of glass, an emblem of her pain and resilience, and in one fluid motion, she drove it into the figure's chest, shattering the illusion of her captivity. Her breath hitched, a torrent of resolve flooding her veins. "This is my life now," she declared, voice rising above the imagined chaos. "I am the author of my story." As she withdrew her hand, the shadow dissolved into smoke, dissipating into the air, leaving her standing alone, lit by the faint glow of dawn breaking through her mental fortress. In that moment, Eleanor forged her ultimate act of liberation, not through violence, but through the unyielding act of reclaiming her agency. Her eyes, once dulled by years of suffering, now shone with fierce clarity. The ghost of her mother's voice still lingered, but it no longer held power. Instead, Eleanor's silent scream of defiance echoed across the ruins of her past, She was free. At last. Amidst the deafening roar of distant explosions and the flickering shadows cast by burning buildings, Eleanor moved like a whisper of steel through the chaos of the air raid. Her breath was shallow but steady, each inhale fueling her resolve. She clutched a small bundle close, her handmade symbols, crafted from torn fabric and scraps she had gathered over months of secret planning, now her clandestine insignia of defiance. The faded emblem, stitched with trembling fingers but unwavering purpose, was her key to slipping past the guards who patrolled the crumbling corridor outside her hiding spot. The guards, their faces obscured by gas masks and dirt-streaked uniforms, paused momentarily, voices muffled behind their equipment. Eleanor watched their movements carefully, her heart pounding like the relentless drums of war outside, yet her mind sharp and clear. As one guard turned to shout into a crackling radio, Eleanor seized her chance. With a swift, almost inaudible movement, she pushed her sleeve up, revealing the symbol stitched into her coat, a secret code known only to her and the Resistance. She stepped forward, her gaze fixed and unwavering. "I've got the message," she whispered to herself, voice trembling with a mixture of fear and fierce determination. Her fingers fumbled for the small, hidden latch she'd sewn into her coat's lining, a signal to her allies waiting just beyond the perimeter. As she moved closer to the guards, she adjusted her position slightly, her coat now appearing as just another battered refugee's ragged attire. Suddenly, the guard nearest her caught sight of her, eyes narrowing behind his mask. "Hey, stop right there!" he barked, voice distorted by the mask. Eleanor froze for a heartbeat, then with a quick, practiced gesture, she held up her palm, an emblematic sign she'd memorized during her clandestine meetings, showing her defiance and allegiance. The guard hesitated, but then, scanning her with suspicion, finally shrugged and turned away. That was her cue. She slipped past them, her movements fluid and precise, her mind replaying the secret message she'd memorized, an unbreakable code of hope in the midst of chaos. Heart pounding against her ribs like a war drum, Eleanor moved through the debris-strewn hallways, her senses alive to every sound, the distant drone of planes overhead, the crackle of radios, the muffled screams from the streets, all a part of her symphony of escape. In her pocket she kept a small, broken fragment of mirror, a symbol of her fractured past and her resolve to reflect her future anew. Every step was a silent rebellion, every breath a vow to reclaim her life. When she finally burst out into the open night, the sky ablaze with tracer fire and shrapnel rain, she knew she had crossed a threshold, no longer merely a survivor of her past, but a fierce architect of her destiny. The chaos around her faded into a background hum as she sprinted toward a shadowed alley, her symbols fluttering like a silent banner of resistance, her spirit unbreakable. In that moment, Eleanor's transformation from victim to survivor was complete. Her heart pounding in her chest, her mind ablaze with hope, and her soul finally unshackled from the chains of her history. Once Eleanor burst into the shadowed alley, her breath ragged but her spirit aflame, she knew she had crossed into a fragile new chapter. The chaos of war still whispered behind her, but in this stolen moment of refuge, she found a glimmer of peace. She sank against the cold brick wall, clutching a small, tattered cloth bag filled with her most cherished artifacts, tiny sketches she had secretly drawn during her darkest hours, and embroidered tokens she had painstakingly stitched in moments stolen from danger. The sketches depicted life as she dared to imagine it. Lush green fields, a bright sun breaking through storm clouds, a gentle hand holding hers, and each line was a rebellion against the horrors she'd endured. The tokens, delicate and symbolic, were patches of fabric embroidered with symbols of hope, a blooming flower, a soaring bird, a tiny star. She traced her fingers over these creations, feeling their textures, rough thread, fragile paper, each a testament to her resilience. She whispered softly to herself, her voice trembling, yet resolute. This is my story now. This is my rebirth. As she spoke, she reached into her pocket and pulled out the broken fragment of mirror, its jagged edge catching the faint moonlight. She held it up to her eyes, gazing into her reflection, seeing the woman she had become, scarred but unbowed, vulnerable yet fiercely determined. Her eyes, once filled with fear, now shimmered with quiet strength. She gently pressed the mirror to her chest, feeling the heartbeat that beat steadily beneath her ribs, a reminder that she was alive, capable of shaping her destiny from the shards of her shattered past. From that moment, Eleanor dedicated herself to reconstructing her identity through these symbolic artifacts. Each sketch a fragment of her hopes, each embroidered token a shield forged from pain and perseverance. She imagined her future self, a woman who had turned her trauma into a tapestry of resilience, who would someday share her story, not with bitterness, but with unwavering hope. The night air wrapped around her like a protective cloak, whispering promises of healing and renewal. And as she carefully tucked her artifacts into her battered bag, she felt a stirring, an awakening that her journey was far from over but was, now rooted in the unbreakable foundation of her own strength. Her quiet smile, filled with the wisdom of decades and the fire of survival, reflected her silent vow. She would rebuild, she would rise, and she would carry her story forward, a beacon of hope for those still trapped in the shadows. Eleanor's hands trembled slightly as she sat before a gathered group in a small community hall, her silver hair catching the warm, flickering light of an aging chandelier. The room was filled with faces eager yet tentative, craving the truth behind her resilient smile. With a deep breath, she lowered her gaze to the worn wooden podium, her voice steady but layered with emotion. You see, I've spent most of my life hiding the darkness that once consumed me, she began, voice echoing softly in the quiet. But I've come to realize that sharing my story isn't just about unburdening myself. It's about shining a light for others still trapped in shadows. She paused, her eyes shimmering with a mixture of pain and hope. During the war, I was merely a child, 10 years old. And yet, I had to make choices that saved my life. My mother, broken by her own suffering, was a storm I couldn't escape, her anger ripping through my innocence like a blade. But one night I decided I'd had enough of being a victim. I slipped through the shadows, crafting a disguise from scraps I found. An old shawl, a stolen badge, a promise to myself that I would not be defined by her brutality. Her fingers gestured to a faded photograph of a young girl wrapped in a makeshift cloak, the fabric frayed but symbolic. That act of defiance became my armor, a declaration that even in the darkest times, a spark of hope can ignite a new path. I joined a secret resistance, not because I was brave, but because I refused to let despair be my end. I learned how to communicate in whispers and secret signals, turning fear into resilience, telling myself every day, "You are stronger than your pain." She paused again, voice thickening but remaining resolute. When betrayal came, when someone I trusted handed me over, I felt the walls of my world collapse. Prison, solitude, and memories of abuse threatened to drown me. Yet I found within myself a flicker of rebellion. I realized that my survival was a testament not to the weakness of my past, but to the strength I forged in choosing to keep fighting. That decision, simple yet profound, became the turning point. I learned that even amid chaos, I could craft meaning, carve out hope, and reclaim my voice. Her eyes scanned the room, meeting those of a young woman who looked on with tears shining. Today I stand before you not as a victim, but as a survivor who refused to let her story end in despair. I speak not to glorify pain, but to remind others that resilience isn't born from perfect circumstances. It's forged in the fires of hardship. Every scar I carry is a testament to my ability to choose life, to fight for my dignity, and to transform suffering into strength. Eleanor's voice softened, yet carried formidable conviction. If my story can inspire even one person to find their voice, to see that no darkness is too deep to overcome, then I've fulfilled my purpose. Because at the end of the day, we all hold the power to rewrite our stories. Regardless of how shattered we've become, we can become the authors of our own hope. As her words settled, a gentle applause rippled through the room, a collective acknowledgement of her courage, her resilience, and her unwavering belief that even in the face of unimaginable adversity, the human spirit can rise, shine, and inspire others to do the same. As the twilight of her life settled softly around her, Eleanor sat in her modest sunlit room, surrounded by stacks of worn notebooks, faded photographs, and delicate sketches she had meticulously crafted over decades. With trembling hands but unwavering resolve, she reached for her favorite pen, a tarnished silver that had traveled with her through the darkest days of her youth, and began to write her memoir. Her voice, though fragile, carried a quiet fire as she whispered to herself, "This is my story, my truth." Every word was carefully chosen, each sentence infused with the weight of her experiences. Her childhood haunted by shadows of violence, her spirit battered yet unbroken by the relentless storm of war and abuse. She described her daring escape from her mother's clutch, recalling how, during a blackout, she slipped past the locked door, clutching a scrap of fabric she'd torn from her dress, a symbol of her resilience, and sneaking into the night, heart pounding with a mixture of fear and fierce hope. She narrated how she had joined the underground resistance, transforming her pain into purpose, using her ingenuity to craft disguises from scraps of cloth, bits of mirror, and symbols of defiance she had hidden in her pocket. "I looked at myself in the broken mirror," she remembered aloud, "and saw someone who refused to be defeated." Her story wove vivid images, the smell of damp stone in underground tunnels, the distant echo of bombs falling, the taste of ash on her tongue, and the sensation of her heartbeat pounding in her ears as she navigated perilous streets. As she wrote, her eyes flickered with tears and smiles, recalling her mother's wrath and her own daring acts that defied despair, sneaking messages under the noses of soldiers, teaching herself to read from tattered books, and sketching symbols of hope that she kept hidden in a secret box beneath her bed. Every scar, every struggle, these are the pages of my resilience, she murmured, clutching a small carved wooden token she had kept since childhood, a reminder of her journey from darkness into light. Her voice grew steadier as she wrote about the moment she decided to turn her pain into purpose, forging a legacy not just of survival, but of empowerment. "When I finally found my voice," she said softly, "I realized I was no longer just a victim of circumstance. I was a survivor, an architect of my destiny." She paused, gazing out the window at the fading sunset, her heart swelling with a mixture of melancholy and pride. With her story now pouring onto the pages, she knew she was planting seeds of hope for generations yet to come. This memoir, she understood, would be her gift, her symbol, her voice, her enduring message that even in the deepest shadows, the human spirit can ignite a blaze of resilience and transform suffering into a legacy of strength. Eleanor's final moments were bathed in a gentle golden glow, filtering through the cracked window of her modest room, where decades of sorrow and resilience had quietly settled into the creases of her face. Her trembling hand reached out to grasp a faded photograph of her younger self, eyes wide with innocence, hair tousled by the chaos of war, yet radiating a spark of determination that no amount of suffering could extinguish. She gazed at the image, her faded blue eyes shimmering with a mixture of tenderness and forgiveness, as if she were speaking directly to her past self. "You survived," she whispered softly, voice barely audible. And that was always enough. Her lips curled into a faint, peaceful smile, her expression a mosaic of serenity and strength, as if she had finally laid down the heavy burden of guilt she carried for so long. She reached for her worn, carved wooden token, the symbol of her relentless journey, her testament that even the darkest shadows could be pierced by the light of choice and hope. Her fingers trembled as she clutched it close, then paused, her breath shallow but steady, as memories flooded her mind like an ebbing tide. The screams of bombardments, the warmth of stolen moments of kindness amid cruelty, the silent promises she made to herself in the depths of despair. With a quiet resolve, she looked out once more, her voice a whisper of wind. "Forgive them, and forgive yourself," she murmured, voice thick with emotion. Her gaze softened as she whispered words of hope and liberation, understanding at last that true strength was not rooted in the battles fought outside, but in the unwavering choice to forgive, to accept, and to finally embrace the peace she had long denied herself. Her eyelids fluttered closed, and a gentle smile lingered on her lips as she drifted into eternal rest, her spirit finally free from the chains of her past, knowing she had turned her suffering into a legacy of resilience, proof that even amidst the greatest darkness,